just the fact that someone fought the British did not necessarily mean that person was a freedom fighter of India. Now, if there was no nation, then what freedom of which nation was he fighting for? These were attempts again of the BJP government in Karnataka, the ridiculous, attempts of the bird coming and taking him on its wings. I think now the politicization and the weaponization of history and historical characters also manifests in the way this session is titled. Just about 4,000 words or something of all of Ashoka's inscriptions, on the basis of which you make conjectures. I don't know in which other country in the whole world, somebody who destroyed your best universities, you're actually eulogizing that person and having a town named after him.
Welcome, Vikram. We meet again on the same stage a year later. The latest book Vikram Sampath has written is on Tipu Sultan. It is one of the most revealing stories of India. Now tell me, you have Tipu Sultan as a hero in Karnataka, at least some parts of Karnataka, or he's celebrated as a hero in some parts of Karnataka.
Not really.
Okay. I mean, then you have his invasion of Kerala. Now, I come from Palakkad, where this Tipu Sultan's fort kind of sits on top of a hill overlooking everything. It is a symbol of brutality. Now, why is the horrible brutality of Tipu Sultan, the massacre of knives, the hanging of children from trees, why is it this not yet part of the Indian narrative of freedom?
I think you all have an overdose of history today. Early in the morning to actually have history classes is quite something.
But that's why making it interesting.
Yes, and thanks to the conclave that I think on this very day we have 3 sessions on history. You said Tipu Sultan was a hero in Karnataka. I'm born and brought up there. I think he's a hero in pockets. So this title of this session also, Heroes, Villains and Survivors, I think it's very difficult to actually compartmentalize people into these straitjackets and binaries of ones and zeros. A lot of them are in the large interlude of grey. I think there are more than 50 shades of grey when it comes to human beings and their characters. But certainly someone like a Tipu Sultan would tend to veer closer, according to me, and as per the evidence, to the negative side. And this, as Sanjeev was also mentioning, post-independence, the kind of history that was written, just the fact that someone fought the British did not necessarily mean that person was a freedom fighter of India. And see the dichotomy here, Ravi, that the same class who say India was not even a nation, and it was a British Raj which made us or united us into a nation, also called Tipu Sultan a freedom fighter. Now, if there was no nation, then what freedom of which nation was he fighting for? He was fighting, obviously a very brave soldier, no two doubts about that, fought till the last breath of his life. But was he fighting for the freedom of India or to save his own personal honor and family and kingdom? So that becomes important. The other thing that people normally say is a lot of pre-modern era was violent. So all these atrocities that you speak of about against the Nayars, against the Mandyam Iyengars in Karnataka, or the Christians, the Mangalore Christians, and the Kodavas in Coorg, this is all part of the larger pre-modern era. Everyone was violent. Of course, war would lead to collateral damage for civil society. We are seeing that even now in what happens with Russia, Ukraine, or anywhere in the Middle East. But I think some people being more violent than the others, and this violence being driven largely by theology, largely by identity. And how do you even define genocide? According to the United Nations Convention on Genocide, Prevention of Crime of Genocide in 1946, it clearly says, the identity of a person on the basis of race, religion, caste, or whatever, to target them on that classifies as genocide. So, Hyder Ali, his father, was also violent, but then here there was a focused targeting of people based on their religion, both Christians as well as Hindus of Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, all of them being targeted that way, clearly classifies this as one. And these are not just stories which were frozen in the past and don't matter now. That intergenerational trauma and the memories are there even to this day. Now, the group of people, about 700 Mandyam Iyengars, men, women, and children, who were actually brutally killed by subterfuge. They were called for a feast in a temple called the Lakshmi Narasimha temple in Srirangapatna. And while they were in the middle of their meal, the doors were closed of the temple and elephants being sent in to trample all of them to death. Quite similar to what General Dyer did, I think, in Jallianwala Bagh. And to this day, after 200 years, the members of that group, the Mandya Mayangars, they do not celebrate Diwali because this was done on Diwali, Eve, Naraka Chaturdashi. They do not celebrate Diwali while the rest of us in India celebrate the festival. So this is not frozen 200 years back. Similarly, the Canara Christians, even now if you go to Mangalore, right from the Archdiocese of Mangalore, the bishop and everyone, all of them came up in arms against the Tippu Jayanti that was commemorated there. Similarly, the Nayars and the Thiyas in Malabar. In Coorg, I was just there last week in Kodagu. There was an upheaval and a kind of catharsis of emotions for several of them because close to 40-60,000 Kodavas being brutally massacred in this place called Devati Param on 12th of December 1785. And to this day, that day is observed by the Kodavas as Martyrs' Day. So when you have a large body of evidence which is still living, this is not history frozen in the past, in oral narratives, the Kodavas don't have a script, but they have oral stories which is compiled in a book called Pattole Palame, where they actually talk about the tortures that were inflicted upon them by Tipu Sultan's reign. You spoke of Kerala and Palghat. It is called the Padayotta Kalam, right? The military regime of Tipu, where thousands and thousands of people were massacred and temples and churches were destroyed. So I do not subscribe to this larger view that let's not talk about him at all, let's remove him. Even when the BJP was in government in my state in Karnataka, that was the demand. Let's not talk about Tipu Sultan, let's remove the chapters on him from our textbook. I think that is a very puerile kind of argument because you can't wish away your past. Whether you like a person or don't like a person, history is what happened. But I think don't glorify them, particularly with the idea of identity politics, particularly with the idea of appeasement, or to whitewash the crimes, whitewashing the crimes of people like this, and actually elected state government on taxpayers' money, commemorating this with a Tippu Jayanti when, communities today still have wounds and memories of what happened to them, I think is an affront to a lot of these people and what they, their emotions and sensitivities also.
So switching to a more modern villain who is not a villain, the subject of your book, Savarkar, an earlier book. Now my point is, I'm coming to the point, my point is that a man could not have spent 16 years in jail by being a coward. A man who couldn't have spent so many years in jail being beaten, etc., as a coward. Now my question is that, I've read the book, we reviewed the book, and a lot of information came through. I'm talking about the curriculum, right? The educational curriculum. What is more heard about him? Is somebody writing about little blue bird coming and rescuing him? It comes to a kind of comic kind of situation. So, I mean, you looking at alternate historians are not doing enough to, upturn roll back the narrative. Why is that? What is the resistance to it?
I don't think there is a lack of, textual material which is coming up. Sanjeev also mentioned those. These were attempts again of the BJP government in Karnataka, the ridiculous, attempts of the bird coming and taking him on its wings. They said it's poetry and poetic, license. Now, at least today in India, we are in a situation where we can mainstream and even talk about someone like a Savarkar. We're talking of intolerance today and illiberalism today and so on. But I would draw the attention of all of you to pre-independence, just immediately after independence, someone of the eminence of Pandit Hridayanath Mangeshkar, the brother of Lata Mangeshkar. When Savarkar was also a great poet in Marathi, he wrote so many poems. So this very famous poem of his, Ne Majasi Ne Parat Matra Bhumila Sagara Pran Tal Madala in Marathi, that poem was... So this was actually composed by Savarkar while he was in the thick of the revolutionary movement in London. So in Brighton, just after the revolutionaries have all unraveled, the movement has unraveled, Madan Lal Dhingra, who was one of his acolytes, is hanged. He goes to Brighton along with Niranjan Pal, who's Bipin Chandrapal's son, and seeing the sagar, the ocean, he just bursts into poetry. This is what Niranjan Pal writes in his memoirs, where he chides the ocean, saying, I trusted you and came so far across the seas to come and work for my motherland, but you cheated me. And he's seeing everyone else having a nice time with their families, and he's so beset with the sorrow of the revolutionary movement unraveling, and that's where he composes this very beautiful poem, which Hridainath Mangeshkar actually tunes, and Asha ji, Lata ji, and all the sisters, they actually sing. And at that time, Hridainath Mangeshkar was with the All India Radio. And for doing this crime of tuning one of Savarkar's poems, he gets a show cause notice, saying, can you explain why you did this? And Hridainath Mangeshkar, very matter of fact, says, good poem, good poet, good enough reason to tune it and sing. And for that crime, mind you, he was actually thrown out of All India Radio. Now we are talking of freedom of expression. Where can't you even accommodate an alternative voice? So why would anybody actually, talk about Savarkar when you knew even tuning a poem of his would actually, you'll have to pay a price with your livelihood and career. So today, at least people are talking about it. And this rancor, Ravi, is I think of more recent vintage, where you talk about him as someone who wrote mercy petitions, or who was a Islamophobe, or he was Gandhi's assassin, and all, one of the collaborators of Gandhi's assassination. But even when he died, someone of the stature of Srimati Indira Gandhi, who was the Prime Minister, I mean, very eulogizing obituary that she writes for him. And it was not a homily. She could have just said a customary condolence. She says his participation in the freedom movement is a very separate chapter in the annals of Indian history, and his patriotism and courage and so on are something that is to be really lauded. And when the centenary of Savarkar happens in 1983, she also gives something like 50,000 from her own account to set up a memorial. A stamp is issued in his honor. A documentary film is made by the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting on his life. Didn't Indira Gandhi know that he was also he was a coward, he was a traitor, he was Gandhi's assassin? And if she did, why did she actually be so generous to do all this? I think now the politicization and the weaponization of history and historical characters also manifests in the way this session is titled, of heroes and villains. You want binaries. Who is a hero? You either belong with us or you're against us. This Bushism that has come into putting people in compartments and not seeing the continuum of them and their legacy, I think that is deeply troubling. And people like Savarkar are, fall guy in this process.
They're human.
Yes.
You're not obviously in the government. You have no direct power on the educational system.
Thank God for that.
You know, power of the educational system. But the Indian history, modern Indian history as being taught to children has been written by establishment historians. Now, why is there no counter-establishment, historians to, offer another version of history or the real version of history?
I think we're all doing
that.
It's
not part of the curriculums.
Now, that question you should have asked the gentleman who spoke before me, because he has the eyes and ears of the government. I don't.
But don't you think it should be?
Of course, it should be. And I all the time castigate, members of the government. We had a HRD minister who also came and said not a single line of history textbooks was changed, as if it is a matter of pride, whereas, it should be a matter of deep shame. Now, see, it's not about someone comes to power, they will change the textbook. The next government comes, they will change, which is what is constantly happening in our country. The football match in which history is the football. To be very honest, for me, how I see history is, you remember that poem we all read as children of the blind men and the elephant. Mm-hmm. So an elephant comes to inside a room and there are 5 blind men and they are asked to touch different parts of the elephant and tell how does the elephant look. So one blind man touches the trunk and he says this is how it looks. One touches the tusk and says it is very sharp. Someone touches the tail and says the elephant is very thin. Now, were they all correct? Yes, but they were all wrong also, because the elephant is the sum of the parts of all these different narratives about that elephant. So literally the elephant in the room here is history. And all of us historians are blind men who are grappling at sources. Now, what happened 1,000 years or even 200 years or 50 years ago, we are able to deconstruct that past only with the availability of sources. And sources could be compromised, could be destroyed, could be exaggerated, and our own incapacities of accessing that source, our non-understanding of language. Most of our history is written in languages we don't understand today, whether it is Sanskrit or Prakrit or Pali or Sentamil or Persian and Arabic. We depend on translations which could be faulty or malicious. So there's a lot of sieving of the truth through filters, and so the final substrate that comes to us is a small part of the whole. So I think a historian needs to be a very humble person who goes by that Indian philosophy of neti neti. Right? This is not the final word. Na iti, na iti. There is something else. But I think the problem, particularly as even Sanjeev postulated, was particularly after independence, the monochromatic and hegemony of just one narrative where alternative versions were not allowed. A subject like this thrives when there are multiplicity of and diverse voices. They need not agree with each other, which is perfectly fine. So as those 5 blind men would probably get into a fight if someone asked them, describe the elephant. It is fine, let them fight. That is the rigor of the subject, the intellectual high that it gives. But to stamp out everything and only promote one blind man saying the elephant is very thin, like the tail, I think does a lot of injustice to the elephant, right? So that is exactly what has been happening here. And it is a pity that, governments are not, including the present one, is not aware of the fact or alive to the fact that this is something so important. History is a mirror in which I think we can identify ourselves as a civilization, as a nation, and as a people. It may be a very boring subject for most students and youngsters in schools and colleges because it is only rote learning, mug up dates, who succeeded whom, which war, which year, extraneous details which have no meaning. But I think our colonial masters, and even after independence, people understood, like George Orwell had said, if you want to destroy a people, the first thing you need to do is to deny and also obliterate their understanding of their own history. And that is why it becomes such a powerful tool to our self-identity, to our concept of our self-concept as a nation. And so the importance of this should go beyond mugging up irrelevant details, which is sadly not understood by, they just make it, as I said, a football for politics, which is very, very unfortunate.
My question about veracity of history. If you look at the historical records which come, going back to, I don't think any country or any geographical region in the world has had as many invasions and as many intrusions as India. Not even China has had that. And we're talking about even before the Mughals. So as a result, a lot of written history is lost because it is impossible to believe that a people as sophisticated as the Mohenjo-daro civilization and the subsequent kind of countries, subsequent civilizations have not had written records. So why is it because the invaders kind of burnt it as they would kind of burn Alexandria or any other, Takshila? So where is this veracity of records coming from, veracity of facts coming from, or the historical narrative? Beyond the oral.
No, that would be different, Ravi, for different time periods. I mean, more modern era, which is what I deal with, largely early modern and modern India, you have a plethora of records. Thanks to, of course, the Westerners coming, their records in Britain or France and other places. But the farther you go back in the past, the sources become scantier and scantier. I think they're just about, I was reading somewhere, there's just about 4,000 words or something of all of Ashoka's inscriptions, on the basis of which you make conjectures. You make assumptions and probably ask interesting questions rather than provide answers and solutions. As you go further back in the distant past, the haze also varies. And also our own idea of documentation, I think, was very different. There is a quote that is attributed to Kalhana, the chronicler of Kashmir history, the Raja Tarangini, which very meticulously, right from the 8th century to I think the 15th century till the 16th century till Akbar, annexed Kashmir. There are 4 or 5 series of Raja Taranginis that are written, and in the very first section, Kalhana says what is the purpose of history. And the shloka goes, Dharmartha Kama Mokshanam Upadesha Samanvitam Kathayuktam Puravrittam Itihasat Chakshmate. Puravrittam, or the narratives of the past, told to you in a Kathayuktam, in a story format, for the attainment of the four Purusharthas of Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. But also there is a Upadesha Samanvitam. There is a didactic element of good and bad, Dharma, Dharma, and all of that. Itihasata Chakshmate, that is called Itihasa. And Itihasa, the Sanskrit word, also translates to it thus happened. This happened so. So, our purpose of writing history, there was a very clear enunciation. So, what is generally called Itihasa in the Sanskrit, body of work is the Puranas, the 18 Puranas, Mahabharata and Ramayana, all of which have all these elements. If you see the Mahabharata, actually in the Bhishma Parva, there is about 70 odd verses which go into details about all the Janapadas, all the various communities. It's a ethnographic documentation of Bharat Varsha as it was at that time. Yavanas on the west, the Kiratas on the east, and spread over so many yojanas and all the different provinces from Magadha, Koshala to southern India. All of this mentioned. So the storytelling, the kernel of the truth is not is to be extracted from this maze of storytelling, which makes it very difficult. Again, because as I said, it is all written in languages we don't understand. In Sanskrit, maybe classical Sanskrit or Vedic Sanskrit, one word can have 5-6 meanings depending upon the context. So unless you are an expert of that language, it is very difficult to deduce what is being said, and so a lot could be lost in translation. But you go here to the Brihadishwara temple, in Tanjavur. On the walls, you have details, the inscriptions of so many Devdasis who got grants. Who were these people? How much emoluments they got? Their addresses, all those inscribed. So wasn't that a kind of documentation? The Cholas left, inscriptions in multiple languages, whether it was Tamil and Sanskrit, and also the copper plates as well as the palm leaves, so that if one destroyed, there's another set. So there was probably a sense of documentation, but as you said, a lot of it has got destroyed. We know for a fact that when Nalanda, the Mahavihara, was burnt by Bakhtiyar Khilji, apparently it burnt for about 6 months. That was the amount of manuscripts that kept burning. So the amount of knowledge also that was destroyed. These were the Princetons and Harvards and Cambridges of our time: Nalanda, Takshashila, Odantapuri, Vikramshila, and all these places. But it is again a travesty that you come out of Nalanda ruins today. The name of the place is Bakhtiyarpur. I don't know in which other country in the whole world somebody who destroyed your best universities, you're actually eulogizing that person and having a town named after him. So that is the level of historical amnesia, historical non-consciousness that we have as a country, and that is deeply disturbing.
See, I see history as an interregnum between wars, what happens between one war and the other, and then go on and so on and so forth. Now, there were a lot of mini wars during British colonial times. Many of the people, I would say heroes or villains, depending on which side you are on, they are not known, they're not sung about, except local. There are tribal kings who fought, but then they're all the margins of history. So what you, Sanyal, what all of you guys are doing is making history more accessible from the heavy kind of heaviness. So how do you bring these people from the margins of history into the mainstream?
I think today there is a space for multiple narratives, which is good. As you said, all these names, maybe 15, 20 years ago, it would be very difficult even to break the glass ceiling of publishing houses and get published if you did not have a certain bent of mind or orientation. Today, at least, things are more open. Thanks largely to the information revolution, the social media, we can always keep castigating it, and it's a double-edged weapon. A lot of hogwash, what is called as WhatsApp history, also can go along, unverified facts, but at the same time it gives a megaphone to everyone to amplify his or her thoughts, which is a good thing. So I think that is one avenue, and today people are able to reach out to a larger cross section. And while you're talking about efforts, I did miss talking about it. While the governments of the day they sleep, they don't take it seriously. I think it is important for us to make a little difference ourselves, be the change that you want to see, as Gandhi always mentioned. A small, very small, tiny step in this direction, I would like to mention and share, because it is an education conclave, a foundation that I have started called the Foundation for Indian Historical and Cultural Research, FIHCR, where we want to produce this very thing, the alternative scholarship. And I won't say alternative, a new scholarship which probably did not exist, because everything is an alternative. There's no one mainstream and multiple alternatives. So we're doing this through multiple verticals. One is we've instituted a fellowship in the name of Sir Jadunath Sarkar, the famous historian, to whom we owe, I think, a lot of our understanding of Aurangzeb and his inscriptions. So every year we select about 8 to 9 scholars, give them a liberal grant, to research and write books. So the more and more books, more and more scholarship is produced. That is the only alternative. The WhatsApp will come after that. But first you need to have the content generated. It can't rest only on, mumbo jumbo. The other part is called the projects group, where we are trying to incubate, research projects in educational institutions, starting with one in the Nalanda University, the reinvented Nalanda University, where we're investigating the rise and fall of Buddhism in India, a very important topic. Again, as I said, it's very difficult to access those sources in translation. So it's a multidisciplinary team where a historian collaborates with a Sanskrit Pandit, a Pali, Prakrit, Tibetan scholar, a Buddhist philosopher and monk, an archaeologist. Historians and archaeologists seldom talk to each other, though the disciplines are so allied. So we are all, in a collaborative fashion, going back to the primary sources, evaluating that, and on the basis of that, there'll be a book series as well as academic journals. Another vertical is called Yuva, I think very pertinent for the large part of the hall here, where for children and young adults, how do you make history interesting, inspiring, and exciting? It is not that boring subject where you just mug up something and vomit it in the exams and forget about it. So, but can you talk history to them in a story form, like what Kalhana had mentioned? Katha yuktam puravrittam that he said. Can you make it interesting? It could be an animation video. It could be a 40-second Instagram reel, if that is all is the retention power and attention span. So talk to them. Don't be preachy. Don't talk down to anybody, but make accessible. The research has to be meticulous, but that has to be accessible to everybody, because history doesn't depend only on someone who's academically trained as a historian. It's everyone's virasat. It is what they inherit. Nobody has a custodianship over Indian history. Every Indian man, woman, child, it is as much theirs as it is someone who's done a PhD or who's teaching history academically in a university.
So we have the herald of interruption here. It's a fabulous discussion. I wish we had taken it forward. Thank you.